Welcome to the War Room. Zelim, now SA Rugby, he'll represent. Ollie Keohane, he'll represent the youth, the next generation. I don't know who's representing, but he's also representing Keohane. I'm Mark Keohane. We've got a great show. We've got lots of giveaways. 2 2019 World Cup jerseys. Woo. My favorite jersey because we won the World Cup. A giveaway for that, there will be an Anne-Lee Murray, First Lady of Springbok Rugby book, the Chosen 23 book, and a year subscription to SA Rugby magazine. This beauty over here, we're going to be talking about the All Blacks next week. This week, it's the Wallabies we're going to talk about. We'll touch on the All Blacks against Argentina. And we're going to start, though, with the Bulls. Currie Cup champions back-to-back. Jakey's Bully Boys, they did it. They play Leinster on the 24th of September in Dublin. 38,000 people allowed there. First time they'll play in front of a crowd, outside of playing in front of 1,000 against Benetton. So maybe our guys just don't like crowds at the moment. First time our Boks played in front of a crowd, they took a beating. We'll start off with you, Zels, the Bulls. I know you're a big Jake White fan.
Bulls by 40 against Leicester.
Oh, you're going to get to that next week, Bulls by 40. For now,
No.
Bulls 44-10, I can give you that score.
Fantastic. What a result. You can't stop Jake. Winning ways. It's happening. Wherever he goes, his teams win.
Fantastic result. If you give the context of a year ago, we thought they would pump them, the Sharks, 40-odd points. They'd hammered them in that first ever Vodacom Fun Day.
Yep.
And then it came down to a 79th minute try by Ono Buerta for 26-19. Ollie, that game, did you think it would be as big?
I thought it would be, I still thought it would be comfortable when I got the news that Johan Goosen obviously wasn't playing. I thought it was going to be a big thing. But Chris Smith was, he was brilliant on the day in the way he controlled that sort of Bull style of play. And I think what that game does speak to is there's been an oversight of what Jake's done with that squad. There's been a lot of people commenting, he's gone and he's bought old guys. Who's he going to bring back next after Bismarck? Is it Victor Matfield or this? But he's actually blooded so many youngsters with that balance of veterans that have been there and done, and he's got a squad full of guys that maybe didn't crack on quite at test level or have now retired, that are sort of seeing these young guys through. And I thought that Saturday was a great example of that. Was Johan Goosen's out, everyone's like, now what does this mean for the Bull squad? It meant very little for the Bull squad. They came out and they pumped the Sharks in the same way that they would have done with Johan Goosen there, playing to a system that Jake's implemented.
But that system, that's the key. There's no secret to what Jake's doing. There's no magic. It's physicality. The forwards will control you, and the backs are close to as big and physically get over the gain line the whole time. And if you can't cope with their physicality, you're out of the game. It's classic test match rugby. Really.
Or you've got to be taking them on the gondolas in Italy and putting some weird water into them, and they come up for 80 minutes and they can't function, as happened against Benetton.
Exactly.
That result will still haunt me. 35-8, my God, it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Hopefully that won't happen when they get into the United Rugby Championships. But just going back to the Bulls and Jake, one thing that was very noticeable, if we look at last year's Currie Cup and the Rainbow Cup, he was willing to play the youngsters in critical stages of games.
Yep.
I recall a few games where he pulled Morne Steyn and put Chris Smith on. Mm-hmm. And I spoke to him afterwards and I said to him, what was that about? And he said, there's no guarantee Morne Steyn's going to be here. He could be playing for the Boks. In a year, he may be retired. He may get injured in the first minute. How can I not play these guys and then potentially need them in a Currie Cup final? So Smith, former Sax boy, Marty's winner, did well at the Pumas, came in, initially did very well for Jake, had a bit of a wobble then. Morne Steyn came back. I think that may have knocked Chris Smith's confidence a bit, that this veteran's come back and taken over. And then Goosen, and the initial thing was to play Goosen at 15, not necessarily at 10. He's come in, he played at 10 and he's played brilliantly. And he can play in the midfield as he did for Montpellier. But Smith has been there the whole time, and again, chatting to Jake, he said there was so much that Smith taught Morne Steyn in terms of attack player training. So much he took from Morne Steyn in terms of controlling a game and kind of playing those big moments. So as you said, Ollie, he did step into a system. And we saw that of the great All Black teams and the very good Springbok teams and that England team under Woodward. It didn't really matter who came in. If the blokes wearing 1 to 8 did the job, the rest actually worked.
That when you speak about systems, is your 22 players must be stronger than your one, So I think teams are always in a good position where the result's going to be determined on the squad and the system that they can implement rather than one player. I think you've got a problem where everything is based on that one player, because when he falls away, then there's 22 guys floating lost. you know? And I think that's what we've seen with the Bulls up until Saturday. Up until Sunday, I thought that that's what we were seeing with the Boks. But I mean, we'll get to that in terms of their selections.
I think what was pleasing for Jake, and you can add on to this, Els, is they've won comfortably. I think there was a bit of familiarity, and they playing the same blokes week in, week out. They dropped that game in Durban, which was a home game, but they took it back to Durban because the one that was cancelled.
Yeah.
Last year, you felt they should have put teams away when they didn't, and they didn't in the big games, especially that final. And then the way they demolished Western Province in that semi-final. End score 48-31, a couple of late tries. When I phoned Jake the next day, I said, explain this big scores, explain the late tries. And he said, well, he really can't at the moment. It could have something to do with the ruck, the tackler. But as long as you're scoring more than the other team, you're winning, you know. And what was most impressive for me was how emphatic the final was. They scored 44 points. They conceded one, and that one they conceded was from their own line-out throw, 5 minutes from their line, when they overthrew it to Mark du Plessis in the 68th minute, and Thomas the Tank du Toit scored. But brilliant stuff from the Bulls. Willem Strauss as president, Edgar Rathbone as CEO, Jake White, his assistant coaches, the squad of players that he's built, and then obviously Henning Gericke, the head doctor. And wherever Jake goes, he goes, and they have enormous success. But they've embraced the Carlton Cup. They're players who don't play on the weekend go back and play Carlton Cup. As you said, Ollie, they've brought in so many youngsters from Tuks and from the Carlton Club leagues. And people forget that side that actually went over and played against Benetton was a hell of a young side. And on that day, they lost 45-24 to a Western Province team with 22 new caps, all out of the Carlton Cup, playing against Western Province's strongest. The thing was, how did they score 4 tries or 3 tries? You know, so the depth is there, and I just think Jake White and the Bulls franchise, give them their dues. It's been magnificent. The key now to kick on in the United Rugby Championship, they have the toughest opening draw because they're away against the defending champions. That's a game we will chat about next week. But I just want your take. Ollie touched on it. Bismarck du Plessis.
Fantastic pickup. When Jake first took over at the Bulls there, of the issues that I thought he had to resolve was a very young hooking core. You know, guys that have young sort of stars, up and coming prodigious talents, but they haven't really made any mark in the senior level and looked a little bit shaky to start with. And bringing in a guy like Bismarck obviously just ramps up the opportunity to mentor those guys, to develop those guys, fast track their development. And moving young Hendrik Wessels into the middle of the front row, you've got Skalk Erasmus, Joe van Zyl, Johan Grobelaars there. So much young talent with a guy like Bismarck who's been everywhere in the world in rugby, just about won everything, is the epitome of the kind of hooker that you want at any rugby club. It's gold for them.
Yeah, I think that's what people sort of need to understand a little bit more, is that there's a nuance to him coming back, and people, you know, will be commenting on Facebook threads and stuff saying, oh, well, you know, there's 4 hookers at the Bulls that could be playing, and now you want to bring back a 38-year-old who's going to keep them out. And that's not the case, you know. You're bringing Bismarck back to rotate him with those guys, to nurture them, because they all are of similar age, you know, of similar experience. They're not looking to each other for mentorship, you know. And that's the role that Bismarck's going to play. He's not going to keep them out of the team for the next 5 years. That's not the point at all, you know.
But I mean, those kids at the Bulls, they've just learned how to get on and off the team bus in Cape Town, Durban and Pretoria. This guy has been all over the world. When they go and they fly into Ireland, he's going to be absolutely no trepidation from Bismarck. He knows everybody at customs on a first-name basis. You know,
well, I go back to, and this has always been Jake's mentality and his philosophy, is when he got Osterrand to come out of retirement and knew how to manage him, you'll train X amount of days, you'll be on the bicycle because of that knee, I don't expect you to scrum the hell out of people for 6 days. He got Percy Montgomery back. Those 2 senior players were players who had success. They had beaten the All Blacks in New Zealand. Osterrand was a World Cup winner. And Jake's thing was he brought half his under-21 world champion side into the Boks almost immediately, led by Skalk Burger and Farid Aprea. And his thing was, when Osterrand sits in the change room next to you and you're 21 years old and he's beaten the All Blacks and he's won a World Cup, you feel a bit comforted.
When he says relax, you believe
you
him.
relax. Yeah. And I think that's what he's done with the Bulls. So you take a masterstroke to invest in Cornell Hendricks, to move him to 12, but in the team dynamic, comfortable enough to put Cornell Hendricks back to 14 when he brought in Harold Foster, and Lionel Mapu has been sensational. Lionel Mapu, who was just hanging around in the second division in France, shows he's still got a lot to offer the game. Then you look at a youngster like Ulrich Loh, who's blossomed around an Arno Buerta. You think what an Ulrich Loh has got from a Dwayne Vermeulen, what a Chris Smith is getting from a Mornay Steyn, and a Marcel Coetzee, and so a Jacques du Plessis that's coming back now. So I think he's really shown every other franchise how to contract, and he's saying that there are good South African players who potentially won't play for the Springboks again, who should be playing here and not be playing for Montpellier or for Leicester or whoever else, or going to Japan. Geo Aplon, another prime example. He's come back, even though he's been injured for the best part of the 18 months, the work he's done with David Creel at the back and the kind of confidence that he gives to them, I think it's just been fantastic for South African rugby.
Absolutely.
Everyone is now a Bulls fan, apparently. You can't find anyone who didn't support any other team but the Bulls, especially in Cape Town. And then I look at some of the signings Province have made, and it baffles the mind of who they're bringing in and why they're bringing in him. I thought that their fly-off signing is probably one of their best, Brock Harris, that they brought back. I don't think Marnie Libbock's going to get a game again. Brock Harris is there at 10, first receiver, take the ball and go. But next week we'll be chatting in depth about the United Rugby Championship, the 4 South African franchises that will be taking on the best of the Celtic nations, and whatever Italy's got to offer. We're going to go to Test Rugby. Before we go to Test Rugby, if you pick the correct score, that's the correct score, you will win a 2019 Springbok World Cup jersey. If you marginally off, you may still win that jersey. The War Room panel will decide. Closest score gets a year subscription to SA Rugby magazine. And then we also have the prize of Anne Murray's book, which I authored, The First Lady of Springbok Rugby. If you can get the first point scorer, you get that one. And if you get the first try scorer, you get my chosen 23, the best 23 players I think have played for South Africa since 1992. Great prizes. And Zels will tell you where to get it later on in the show. Looking at the All Blacks against Argentina, shut them out 39-0. They picked their side, 12 changes. What do you expect this week?
Just to clarify, you're talking about predictions for the Wallabies Springboks game.
This is only for the Wallabies Springboks game. It's the only one we really care about.
No, you got to think that the All Blacks will win, but interesting that they've made wholesale changes like they have, and they're talking about resting players because they've got this block of 5 tests. Radical overhaul of that team, and going to be interesting to see how the Boks look at that match going into next week, because I have 2 completely separate lineups to analyze. And what do you take? I mean, even though we expect them to revert to type, what do you take out of that match last week, and what do you take out of this match given the changes?
Well, it's very similar, Ollie, to what the Springboks did. We played a team and made 12 changes and played them and won 32-12 and won 29-10. We were 29-3 up till the 83rd minute. They've won 39-0. Our 2 teams, regardless if we played, emphatically beat them by 20 points. Yep. Do you expect this team to be able to shut out a Pumas 39-0?
Look, I think, again, I mentioned it last week, is largely dependent on, you saw how the Pumas approached after getting thumped in that first game. You saw how they approached that second game. I keep saying 21, but 21 penalties. They just would not let the Boks play. And there is no reason to believe that they won't do that again against this All Black side. But with that being said, this Pumas side isn't it. Do you know what I mean? I don't think they have it in them to even box a win against one of the sides. Potentially, Australia at the end, you never know. But I think the handicap on betting sites is about 19.5 or 20. Yeah, I think it's about 19.5 points to the All Blacks. I think it'll still be a comfortable 20-point win for the All Blacks. Might not be a greatest game to watch, but look, the All Blacks still, regardless of who's in their pack, they've still got the forwards that Argentina kick that ball down, someone picks it up at the back and they score a 70-meter try, and they just need 3 of those to win by 20 points. So I think it speaks more about the low quality of the Puma side this year than necessarily the quality of the All Black second string guys, but I still think it'll be a comfortable win for them.
I agree with that.
The Pumas, I mean, that magnificent win against the All Blacks where it was real old Pumas rugby. Pablo Matera led the way. They bullied that young All Black side up front. It was like the All Blacks were in COVID isolation for about a year before that game. They really got hit hard. They came out the next week and won 38-0, so let's not forget that.
Yeah.
But was that their game for the century, the Pumas? Because I was particularly disappointed with them in South Africa. I still get when the All Blacks smashed them because of this magnificent back play. But they've always troubled us physically and fronted up, and then we've had to grind them down to get wins. And here they just were never in the contest, and they were never in the contest from the moment Leolala just smashed Matera at kickoff.
Yeah.
And explain it to me, Zels. You're the technical analyst. Why weren't they committing to the ruck against New Zealand?
That's a great question. I mean, it looked like they... Okay, so look, obviously you don't want to throw numbers into defensive breakdown and get shorter numbers in the line, but what really surprised me was the lack of line speed from Argentina. They almost stood off and walked up as the ball came out. And at the beginning, it looked like it was working because New Zealand saw an opportunity to take easy meters close to the ruck and started playing one-pass rugby, and that sort of ran right at the Materas of this world and kept Argentina in the game, and they forced a few turnovers. I thought, okay, that's an interesting strategy. Let's see how it plays out. But then the All Blacks clicked, and they said, hang on a minute, these guys are swamping us. The Pythons are holding us down at the breakdown. Let's move it a little bit wider. And then that lack of line speed, they just got absolutely shredded by the Kiwi backs.
But if you also look, Beauden Barrett looked as sensational as he did 3 years ago. There was no press defense.
Like
he was under no pressure.
No, exactly.
That was Beauden Barrett at his best, but not actually having to navigate traffic.
Can I just ask you guys on that? So you wrote a piece, I think justifiably so, at the end of the Super Rugby campaign. So Aotearoa campaign saying, Richie Mo'unga is the best 10 in the world at the moment. I'm not sure what your thoughts are, Zels, but I think this Beauden Barrett situation is such an interesting one because I've always been such a big Beauden Barrett fan, and he got shifted out of 10 based on Richie Mo'unga being too good to not pick, not because Beauden Barrett did anything wrong at 10. I still think he has so much value to offer at 10 against specific teams, and I think he can be used by the All Blacks depending on who they're playing. What do you guys think the All Blacks do going forward here?
Look, I think Fozzie's painted himself in a corner there, and he has to. He's going to have the advantage against the Boks. He's picking Beauden Barrett at 10 in the first one, and he's picking Mo'unga at 10 in the second because Mo'unga's only available for that last one. But when Beauden Barrett said, I don't play 15, then I sit on the bench and I compete for the number 10 jersey. I still think if you're going to play Mo'unga, you play Beauden Barrett at 15. He is such a wonderful footballer, and you put Geordie Barrett on the bench. If they are concerned about Beauden Barrett's goal kicking, that yes, he averages over 70%, but it's the 30 that he misses that seem to be quite significant in big games. I just don't know how you can have a player of his class
Not in the starting.
Sitting on the bench for 40 minutes. You want him on that field for 80 minutes. You know when you can bring him in at first receiver. I think any team that's playing against an attack that has Mo'unga at 10 and Beauden Barrett
Absolutely.
at 15 and you're splitting their roles is in trouble. I think the dual role didn't necessarily work as they wanted it to work because I just don't think they got their thinking right behind the two players. As opposed to saying to Beauden Barrett, you are playing 15 and there'll be times that you come into that role and he is 10. Not you are a 10 playing 15 in the game. But a wonderful problem for Ian Foster to have and John Plumtree to have. I just thought it was the game that potentially gives him that confidence because he just looked like he was in no man's land for 2 years. Even when he went to the Blues, they started him at Terry Black at 10 because it suited the team. Your best 10 in the world is playing 15. I don't get it. You know, it's...
If anything, if you've got two of those two guys in the team, for me it would be like you start Beauden Barrett at 10 potentially. You've actually got Mo'unga on the bench, and then later in the game, you could go straight swap. At 40 minutes, you put Beauden Barrett at 15. Mo'unga comes on at 10.
For me, I think Beauden is a 15. I like him at 15. He doesn't like 15, and that's
the problem.
the deciding thing for me in this debate is what the alternatives are. So the reason I would play Beauden at 15 and start Richie at 10 is because the alternatives at both of those positions is a massive drop-off. If you don't start Beauden at 15 with Richie at 10, you're going to start Geordie Barrett at fullback, or worse, Damien McKenzie. And the same goes for 10. If you don't start Bowden at 10 this week, you start Damian McKenzie there. The next guy up in this line is not a great player.
Well, we'll see it on Saturday because they started Damian McKenzie at 10.
There you go.
And they're starting Geordie Barrett at 15.
And Quintapoa at 12.
Yeah. I rate that kid. I think he's got
Quinn.
something.
Yeah.
I think it's a very talented kid, and he looks very much in that traditional second 5'8" mold of New Zealand players.
That's the punch they need.
I still think they got a problem at halfback. If you Finley Christie,
Massive.
He's on the bench. He'll come on.
What do you think of Rico Ioane now at 13?
Look, they're loving him at the moment. 13 are on the win. I think again in a game like we saw last week, they gave him so much space. He's getting confidence back in running with the ball again. I felt when he went to 13 for the Blues, something mentally changed about his game where it was about creating and actually not just taking that burst.
He's a finisher.
He's a finisher. And it's going to be interesting to see where Caleb Clark comes back into this thing.
Sure.
He's going to be playing for Auckland in the MPC. I mean, he was the superstar. They were calling him the next Lomu a year ago. Decided to go to the Olympic Games, couldn't make the squad, never played a game.
Yep.
Said it was worth it and that he'll fight his way back in. But it's that second win because Ione was on the way out again. You thought, okay, this is another one of those wonderful winners that gets 3 seasons and then goes to France and maybe comes back and plays out his career for Counties Manukau or Southland or one of those teams. So I mean, their backline stocks have always been exceptional. We've been very critical of them all year about their forward play. I thought that forward pack that played against Argentina was the best forward performance I've seen from the All Blacks.
Yeah, that's true, for a long time.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Probably since that opening game against the Springboks in the World Cup, where they did front us physically. Somehow hung on in that first 30 minutes. I was very impressed with that. That looked like a John Plumtree Sharks pack.
Yeah.
They really punched above their weight. I think their hooker options are looking good. They talk about the Tongan Thor. This kid they've got, the 15-year-old who came from Tonga, he is the real deal. He's starting on...
He's not 15 anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. He may just be. He's going to the Under-20 World Cup.
Yeah.
So I like the way he played. I'm not convinced with Jacobson at 8. But
so they're starting Satutu there this week, eh?
Yeah.
Hoskins, yeah.
But I liked Retallick and Barrett together. It's Sam Whitelock is the captain. He's unavailable because he's become a dad again, and he's 120 plus tests. Wonderful servant. I just wonder if this is not where you're going to see Barrett start taking over. And when the All Blacks have done very well in the past, Kevin Mialama being a prime example, is they'll keep that veteran in the system, as you spoke about, like a Bismarck, a Skalkbrits, till he hasn't even got 10 minutes left in his legs, because the dynamic that he gives to those youngsters.
They squeeze those minutes out of those guys.
And a lot of our public just seem to be ignorant to that fact and obsessed with age. It's like when I wrote a year ago, Morné Steyn has to be in that mix for a line series that could come down to one kick. People ask me if I want to bring Craven back. It's time to play the 19-year-old kids. No, it's not. Play the 19-year-old kid next to the 35-year-old and let that cycle just keep on going like that.
There's also something to be said of not, you talk about being obsessed with age, but what seems to be a trend in this country is you stick a guy in 19, 20 years old because you don't want to pick the older guy. He doesn't actually quite cut it straight away at test level because he's 19, 20 and he gets thrown out the system for 5 years. You've got Johan Goosen has now come back. Everyone's calling for him to be a buck at 29. Yeah, he debuted at 20, I think, in Henneke's side. But you look at the All Blacks, and there's a lot of guys now that are coming to the fore. You talk about their forwards, like Akira Ioane, for instance. For the last 4 years, he's been sent back home, brought back in, sent back home, not picked. There's a lot of guys that have actually been picked, sort of fallen out of favor, but they keep them in the system. And they make sure that by the time they're 24, 25, they've actually worked their way back in properly.
I remember Rod McQueen saying about Stephen Larkham, who redefined fly-off play. But he was a fullback.
Fullback, yeah.
And it was Matt Burke or Stephen Larkham. And his thing was Stephen Larkham is too good to leave out. So we have to make him a fly-off. And he said it took them 2 years and plenty losses to get the Stephen Larkham who would go on to play 100 test matches. And his thing was, you have so many 10 options in South Africa that you want the 100 test Stephen Larkham in one test.
Yeah.
Where we had to coach him to get to that level.
Yeah.
And start coaching your players.
Yeah.
And start trusting them.
Yeah.
And play them and accept that you may drop certain matches because the kid's 21, he's going to make certain mistakes. Which is a nice way for us to swing onto the Boks and a Damian Willemse.
Okay.
Zal.
Take it away.
My boy.
Take it away, Damian Willemse.
Oh, I mean, it's well known fact. I love Gaza. I think he's a great player. I think he's got speed, he's got physicality, he's agile, he's a playmaker. I think he's got great temperament. I think he does need to do a little bit of growing up, probably, in terms of coachability issues. But I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a red flag with this guy. I think all youngsters are in that same mold. What I don't like is that Damian Willemse is being used in 50 different positions. He comes on the weekend there to kick this conversion that turns out to be critical after being a fullback, being a centre, not having kicked for months. I just think we're not managing this kid properly. And I'm not saying this is an attack on the Boks or an attack on the Stormers. I just think that circumstances have conspired to put him into a difficult position. And now he's kind of got to climb out of it, but he's a youngster. It's quite tricky.
Well, what's his journey forward for you in a Springbok setup, specifically positionally?
Yeah, so I mean, the way I look at it is you got to get these youngsters on the field and get them some game time, especially when they're coming from places where they don't have a lot of stability. Guys coming out of the Bull system, they're winning, they've got confidence, they're in a good system. You could plug those guys in. For me, Van der Cruyff, when he first started out at the Boks, he was on the wing and he played centre and fly off for Western Province, and they slowly sort of worked him in and found him a spot at fullback. And for me, Damian Willemse and Fussy, for that matter, are two guys that we need to try and find them game time in these test matches to get them test ready. So Willemse, I think, adds value at 12. You've got a very experienced 10 there. Obviously, Damien Delendi is the best 12 in the world, but we've got to find gaps for a guy like Damien to get on the field, to learn the craft at test level from some of the best, and to put him in a position where, like Danny Carter took over from from Andrew Mertens. You create a situation where this guy starts to feel comfortable at test level. He's got a very simple, narrow job spec to start with, where the decision making is really limited. And when he's comfortable, then you start giving him more opportunities. You don't throw him in a vital test match, come back against Australia and say, kick this conversion for the win. He's just not going to do it.
I like what you said there, just in terms of that Dan Carter dynamic, and Dan Carter actually starting out his career as a 12, coming into 10, because I believe that, Damian Willemse is strongest actually in a sort of first receiver. He takes that ball to the gain line. He's got such a swerve. He actually reminds me, when he plays 10, a little bit of Richie Mo'unga in terms of that like dynamic sort of step. So I think his way forward is there, and if he's getting game time at 12 outside of Andre Pollard, if there's ever an opportunity for him to step into the number 10 jersey, or there's a need for him to, it's a lot easier to grasp the concept of being the number 10 in the general when you've been playing outside him, rather than when you've been playing at the back and you've been playing on the wing, but now because of your talents, the coach is like, cool, come in and play 10. So I think that's a great point you make, that he should be getting game time at 12.
I found that little cameo he had against Georgia. It's only 12, 13 minutes at 12. Very impressive. Admittedly, the opposition wasn't a whole lot, but they were physical. I agree with what you say. He needs to be closer to the ruck.
Yeah.
I think at fullback, he thinks too much. He can get found out. And I thought that game against Argentina was a classic case of a massively talented player feeling the heat and wanting to so silence his critics that he tried too hard. And he copped a lot of abuse after that game. He is a fantastic rugby player. I wrote a piece a few months ago saying if he was getting $5 million, he wasn't worth it at this stage. I copped a lot of abuse for that. People thought I was saying he wasn't a good player. But Damian Willemse is not 19 and 20 years old anymore. I remember him making his provincial debut against the Bulls for Western Province and scoring the most sensational try at Newlands, playing against Sonny Ball Williams, and he's like Stormers against the Blues and winning at Newlands and physically fronting those guys. That was a Damian Willemse of 3 years ago. So I remember this kid kicking comfortably at under 20 level, and for Paul Roos and for the SA schools, he was the go-to guy. So something has happened that he believes he can't kick anymore. So they need to get that confidence back in him. So I felt they missed a beat by not picking him at 12 in one of the two tests against Argentina. And where I think the Boks have missed a beat in this rugby championship, and it all came down to them losing that test match, one they never thought they would lose, is they needed to play two different squads against Australia. Because I can tell you now, you can't play this same squad up until the fourth test against New Zealand. They're going to be broken by the time 2nd of October comes.
We're already broken.
And I would like to have seen Damian Willemse play 12. And then potentially shift to 15.
Well, it's what we said during the game, is that, it was almost too late when they brought on Damian Willemse. You almost needed at 40, 50 minutes him to come on and just try create something, because there was nothing happening,
So, I mean, he's a wonderful player. They've kept faith. As Jacques Nienaber said, I've gone with the consistency route. And I think the mentality is we have to win this test. But then it's a big ask to then play the All Blacks back-to-back with the same 22 players.
Yeah.
Look, I hope that they aren't same 23 players.
23, yeah.
I hope that they aren't, thinking of playing the same 23 players against the All Blacks, because when you look at the squad that played last week and that is now playing this week, it doesn't make sense to me, at least, as someone that sort of watched the Bok dynamic over the last 2 years. You know, you're starting 3 locks with one of them on the flank, and you have 2 loose forwards. I mean, you've got 3 loose forwards on your bench, none of who can cover lock. Just immediately, that, you know, I don't really understand the sort of logic in that, and I think we're not playing to our powers, you know. So you said, like when we were speaking yesterday, the argument could be made, okay, we're picking 3 loose forwards, we want to slow the game down in the last 20 minutes when they come on. That's all good and well, it's not our strength. Our strength is, you know, 2 locks coming on at 50 minutes, and we carry on dominating the set piece, you know, from 50 to 80 minutes, and teams just can't keep up. So, you know, I still think we're going to grind out a win this Saturday, but I really hope that there are some adjustments made, that, you know, Lurt's hopefully back, that we can be picking, you know, a lock on the bench.
But Mark, I mean, just how low on the picking order are our loose forwards that we're down to like 7th or 8th on the lock depth chart, and these guys are still stuck on the bench? You know, if these guys are such good players, at what point do we start them? How many lock injuries do we have to have before we go, okay, we're actually going to start one of these flankers on the flank?
Yeah.
And not a lock.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that they talk about trust in players. I'm pleased they picked Marvin Orrie, because he's a specialist lock. So if he's next cab off the rank, pick him.
Yeah.
And play him against Australia, play him against the All Blacks, and give him that game time, and let's see if he's got it. And I don't say judge him on one game.
No, sure.
If you believe he's good enough to be there, play the guy. And I just felt when I looked at that squad, I thought there would be 2 different squads that would, and not necessarily 12 changes, but
Sure.
a mix and match till they settle on something. And in their mindset, potentially, even if we drop a game against Australia, so be it. This team needs to beat New Zealand to kind of forage ahead for the next World Cup. There's a bigger picture at play than just the Rugby Championship. I just feel we've gone back into our shells to think, oh my God, we've got to win. And we are going to Suncorp Stadium, where the Wallabies have lost 4 times in the last 18 test matches. They've lost to England once. They've lost to us in 2013. That was their biggest defeat, 38-12. Magnificent performance from the Boks that day under Hanneke Meyer. They've lost to the All Blacks. One of those All Black wins was a 29-28 when Colin Slade scored a penalty in the 80th minute. And there, the All Blacks stuck him on with 5 minutes to go, and they were behind. And they yanked the first choice, which was Barrett, and they said they want to see if Slade's got it. And he kicked the winning goal, and kind of it set him up for a little bit longer in the All Black setup. The Wallabies have won 4 of their last 5 tests against the All Blacks at Suncorp Stadium.
Sure.
It is their Ellis Park. I'm hugely concerned. This test was always the one I was concerned about because it was at Suncorp. And I thought we should have nailed that first test. 36-25. We should have, could have, would have.
Yeah.
All the ifs and buts with those 10 missed points. There's just something for me that, and Clive Woodward said it before the Lions series. COVID's absence for a year, us not playing test rugby for 20 months, meant that World Cup winning squad couldn't evolve their game.
Yeah.
And we now have to start evolving the game. And that's a given. Because the way we played was rugby to win the World Cup. Now to win tests consistently, we've got to add a dimension. And unfortunately, it's got to start now.
Well, that's what I want to say too, is like, you know, the best teams in the world have a sort of, they have a very certain style and it works most of the time. But sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes a team fronts you. I mean, we saw it with when the Crusaders, that 2011 side with Sonny Bill Williams in it, and we just come in. They played the Cheetahs, and the Cheetahs just shut down Sonny Bill and his offload. They just double tackled him, and just the Crusaders couldn't get any momentum going. So even the best style doesn't work sometimes. And what I have found about this Boks squad is, you know, someone made a joke of like, oh, the Boks tell you what they're going to do and they do it and they still sort of win, you know, which for the most part is true. But what I'm finding is when they're doing it and it's not quite working, there's either an inability or an unwillingness to adapt. Nothing changes, you know. So we're kicking up from 9, we're chasing, and we're not winning the ball back. Instead of adapting it and trying something else, we're sticking to it and it's not working, and it's not working.
Yeah, so for me, it's not a style issue at all. I think the Boks are a broadsword, and they're going to hit you with the broadsword, and it works for them, and they win matches. The key fuel to that game plan, though, is that the guys that drive it have got to be hungry. And you can't have Franco Morsler coming out after a game saying Australia was hungrier than us. You can't have your veteran fly off missing kicks at goal. You can't have a situation like that where your game is built on percentages, but then you can't follow through on the game plan because you're missing kicks at goal. So it's not a style issue for me as much as it is a competition issue. Handré Pollard needs to be pushed at fly half. The guy that's coming off the bench has got to be battle hardened and ready to go.
Just on that, you said you wrote a piece on SA Rugby magazine. Why Pollard needs Georson. That was the headline. Everyone went ballistic again. Oh, who else do you want to pick? Pollard plays one bad game. That wasn't the guts of what you said. People
Correct.
don't read the article.
Correct.
What you were saying, he needs to know there's someone capable of
pushing
stepping
him.
in
Absolutely.
and potentially taking his place.
Spot on.
Because at the moment, it's very much Andre 1, Elton Jantjies 2, and Damian Willemse potentially at 3. And there's a big gap between the 3 in terms of how the coaches have picked them. And Pollard's a vice captain. So it's like he's allowed to have a bad game in his head, but he's not under pressure to consistently play well.
Correct.
That he could get dropped. And that's what, am I right in saying? That's the point that you were making, that he just needs that little bit of pressure. It's if you've got two players, it's a Barrett Mohanga situation that the coach can say, hang on a second, bud, we're not going to lose that much by playing the other guy. So I think Pollard will bounce back. He's a wonderful rugby player. To me, he is the best comfortably in South Africa and the best test fly-off in the world. I believe that. Mohanga, the best Super Rugby club fly-off in the world, and Barrett, the best athletic fly-off in the world. But when it comes to fly-off play, Handré Pollard is my man, okay? And I think he will come good. Faf has to come good as well. Faf looked a bit frantic. He looked like the old Faf that didn't quite back himself in certain aspects of the game. But it starts with control up front. It starts with us playing to our strengths. And I don't care what anyone says. Sia Khaleesi, a lack of discipline, got sent off after 20 minutes. That completely changed the dynamic of the game. And it was no coincidence that we conceded then. And the interesting thing is, the Wallabies had scored 10 tries in 3 tests against the All Blacks. Lost all 3 tests quite emphatically, but showed they could move the ball and they can play. Callaway's try was the first backline try in 1,032 minutes against the Springboks since George Bridge scored in the 24th minute of the World Cup opener. And they did it against 14 players. And that could be why Faf was so out of kilter. He should have made the tackle. And that led to that one missed tackle led to the kind of the space. But our defensive system is magnificent. And our guys scramble. What I didn't find in that game, and again, watching from my lounge, very different to being at the field, I didn't find the intensity that I saw in the Lions series. This absolute mongrel. And then Franco Mostert comes out and says, we weren't hungrier. They were hungrier. They surprised us. So I underestimated the Wallabies. It looks like the whole Boks team underestimated the Wallabies. So yes, we will be up for it, but my God, the Wallabies are going to be more confident now. They came into that match with hope. Now they'll come into this one with conviction and playing at their Ellis Park.
Spot on.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like our guys scramble in the defensive system, and I guess you scramble for a team that you think is worth scrambling for, which we've seen them consistently do now against the Lions, during the World Cup when they had to. But I think, like you said, maybe a bit of underestimating Australia, coming out and thinking like, we put the system in place, but we're not actually playing at 100%. And they got found out,
Look, and I think they come out, they win, and to win at Suncorp is a bloody good effort. Many a good team has gone there and lost. It's like many a good All Black team has come to Ellis Park and lost. A brilliant Wallabies team has come to Ellis Park and lost to some very indifferent Springbok teams. I was with the Springboks when we beat the Wallabies twice, with sides that you thought probably 3 or 4 of the Boks would have made a composite side. So grounds do spook certain teams and certain players, and it's a fast-paced track. It's going to test the Springboks. It's going to test that defensive alignment. I am picking Pollard and Faf to have good games because they are the key, and Dwayne Vermeulen to stand up again. But discipline is a must. 21 points, 7 penalties given to Quade Cooper from 40 meters and closer. That is just, and 2 yellow cards. That to me was a sign of a team not mentally switched on and thinking, as poorly as we play, we're going to win this game, and they were 20 seconds away from winning it. as poorly as they played. So Australia are euphoric that they got this win, and kudos to them for fronting. But what did they offer in that second half? A penalty at the end, and that was it.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. And I mean, they've stuck with the same team this week, so expect more of the same.
Yeah, they don't have the luxury of wholesale changes, you know?
All right, your result?
I think the Boks will take it. I'm going to give them 5 points. So 27-22.
I'm going 25-18 to the Boks.
To the Boks. It's going to be a Bok win. It's going to be Pollard. And maybe Damian Billinson to come off the bench and show us a bit of magic. But I've got the Boks to win, but I really do think it's going to be a one-score game. Suncorp is a huge leveler. You tell us what you think the score is going to be. If you are 100% spot on, you win a World Cup jersey, 2019 World Cup winning Springbok jersey. If it's closest score, a 1-year subscription to the Big Mag, SA Rugby magazine. We're talking about this game next week. And then you also, first point scorer, you get the Anley Murray First Aid of Springbok Rugby book. And first try scorer, you get my chosen 23. And we will put the addresses there of where you've got to go in to enter. Great prizes. Zels, it's been a pleasure. Ollie,
thanks,
always
Mark.
wonderful.
Ollie.
And let's go. Boka, Boka, Boka! Boks to win, 28-22.
Welcome to the war room.